The CDC recently shortened its 14-day coronavirus quarantine to 7 or 10 days, depending on whether or not a person has tested negative for the virus. That choice was not made because of the science, though. Idaho News 6 reporter Stephanie Garibay has more on what influenced the decision.
The CDC is lowering its quarantine period, but not because the incubation period is actually shorter, but as an effort to get more people to quarantine. Since the change was just recently announced, the South Central Public Health District says they have not yet implemented the change and still encourage people to quarantine for the recommended 2 weeks.
As public health officials, we get calls from people with very, very specific situations. So before we change any of our guidelines, we want to make sure that we understand thoroughly what those changes will represent across all of the different cases that we are helping people work through.
On their website, the CDC says you can now quarantine for 7 days after a negative COVID-19 test result, or 10 days if you have not been tested but don't develop any symptoms. They made this decision after they found the chances of transmitting the virus after the 7 or 10 days is fairly low.
The CDC and public health in general do not change guidance lightly. The only time you're going to see guidance change is when there is significant scientific evidence supporting that change. So the fact that the CDC is bringing that quarantine period down a little bit means that there is scientific basis behind that decision.
The South Central Public Health District says they sent the CDC a list of questions they are waiting to be answered before they implement any changes to their guidelines.
Some of the questions that we're working on right now is, does that mean that you should be masking indoors around other family members? Can you end quarantine early if you are considered high risk exposure? For example, if your partner or a family member that you live with contracted COVID-19, can you still end your quarantine early? Some of those questions are still being worked out.
They say even if they implement the new change, they still recommend for everyone to follow the proper safety precautions after quarantine, including social distancing and wearing a mask. In Twin Falls, I'm Stephanie Garibay, Idaho News 6.